Welcome to Hard Script.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You have fun being irrelevant. That's what she said. Not during a fight, not in anger, but with a smirk, glass of champagne in hand, in front of half the room at her company's product launch. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but her assistant accidentally sent the invite to my inbox, thinking it was still our joint address. I showed up without warning. I stood in the back, quiet, watching her from a distance. How she worked the crowd, smiled for the cameras, posed beside the so, like she belonged in some feature spread about powerful women who had it all. And then she spotted me. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. It lasted maybe a second. Then she leaned in toward her colleague and whispered something that made both of them laugh. I started walking toward the bar, keeping my head low, already regretting coming. That's when I heard her voice from behind. "You're really here? That's adorable." I didn't respond. She stepped closer, lowered her voice, and said it. "You have fun being irrelevant." That word hit harder than I expected. She didn't yell it. She delivered it like a final signature on a contract she'd already signed in her head. And the worst part? People heard it. No one said anything. No one even looked directly at me. But the silence that followed was louder than any outburst. I left before dessert. On the drive home, I didn't replay her words. I replayed her tone. There was no venom, no regret. Just a woman who genuinely believed she'd outgrown the man who once built her foundation. I got home, sat at the kitchen table, pulled out the envelope I'd kept tucked away for 3 months. Inside, divorce papers. And signed. Until now. I signed them that night. No second guesses. No emotion. Just one stroke of a pen. Then I called a courier service. Asked for a guaranteed 9 a.m. delivery. To her suite. With a single note inside. "Irrelevant men don't hold keys to exits. But I just unlocked yours." And for the first time in months, I slept like I wasn't carrying dead weight. I didn't expect a response. Not to the envelope. Not to the message inside. But 3 days later, I got a call from her assistant, Rachel. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't even greet me. She just said, "I shouldn't be doing this, but you deserve to know. She's been seeing someone." I didn't ask who, but Rachel told me anyway. It wasn't a stranger. It never is. It was her creative director. A guy I'd met twice. Young, smooth, the kind of guy who finishes your sentences just to prove he can. His name was Tyler. And the worst part? This had been going on for nearly 5 months. Long before she ever called me irrelevant. Rachel kept talking. Her voice shaky. She wasn't subtle. Everyone knew. She just assumed no one would say anything. She was right, until now. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence. There was no rage. No shaking hands. No immediate impulse to confront. Just the slow settling of a truth I'd already suspected. The nights she came home late, laughing at nothing. The sudden bursts of work travel that never needed follow-up questions. It had always been there. The signs weren't hidden. I just didn't want to see them. But now I saw everything clearly. And I didn't plan revenge. I planned precision. I called my bank. Canceled the joint credit card. Froze the shared account. She had her own money, sure. But she was used to mine padding her world. I didn't warn her. I didn't explain. Next, I opened our shared drive. Deleted our vacation photos. Shut down the old Dropbox we'd used for everything from taxes to memories. Logged into Netflix. Removed her devices. iCloud. Revoked access. She once joked that I handled all the boring stuff. She forgot boring men build the infrastructure. And now I was dismantling it, piece by piece. Quietly. Surgically. The final move that night. I sent a message to my lawyer. Full divorce execution. No delay. Everything we pre-negotiated. Don't send anything her way until I say. She wanted freedom. She called me irrelevant. Fine. Let's see how that freedom tastes when she realizes she's locked out of every system she forgot I built. The confirmation didn't sting. It settled. Like cold water on skin that had already gone numb. Still, I needed more than hearsay. Not to confront her, but to prepare. So I logged into the old iPad we used for travel. The one she hadn't touched in months. The one she forgot was still connected to her iMessages. It was all there. A thread with hundreds of texts, photos, voice notes. No code names. No caution. Just comfort, like they'd stopped hiding the moment I stopped matching. They made jokes. About my routines. About my predictability. They even had a nickname for me. Mr. Wi-Fi. Because I was always there. Always stable. Always invisible. I read the part where she told him, he won't care. He's too proud to admit he lost me. She was half right. I didn't care anymore. But not because I was proud. Because I had already let go. I took screenshots. Not for leverage. Just to remember the moment my silence became justified. Then I checked the shared calendar. She had a conference coming up. Big hotel, executive suite, full PR team in tow. Her name on banners. Her face on digital billboards. She'd be shining. So I planned my exit to match her spotlight. The next day, I rented a workspace 2 floors above her suite. Not to spy, just to watch. I booked it under my company name. The one she always mocked for moving too slow. That morning, I dressed quiet. Neutral. Clean lines. I brought nothing with me but a manila envelope. Inside it, copies of the texts. My signed half of the divorce agreement. A notarized request for asset division. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. At 3:12 p.m., I handed it to a courier from the building office and gave him her suite number. He asked, urgent? I said, not anymore. Then I sat back and watched from behind tinted glass as the delivery arrived. The assistant accepted it. 3 minutes later, she opened the door. Stood frozen. And then, I saw it. The first crack. She wasn't angry. She looked cornered. For the first time since this began, she looked like someone who realized the game wasn't being played anymore. It had ended. Quietly. Without her knowing. I left the hotel before she could leave her suite. I didn't wait to see her reaction. Didn't need to. There's something sacred in silence when it follows precision. That night, I shut off my phone. Permanently. Got a new number. New SIM. New email. No trace. Deleted all my social media. Vanished from the platforms she used to track me out of habit. It wasn't rage. It was a reset. I packed the essentials, left the rest behind, and drove north. 3 hours upstate. A friend owned a quiet cabin overlooking a frozen lake. No neighbors. No noise. Just the sharp, honest kind of winter that clears your head. I told no one. She called. Dozens of times. Texts turned from cold to desperate. From, we need to talk, to please, just respond. She wasn't apologizing. Not yet. She just wanted control back. And I had finally taken it away. Rachel messaged once more. Said she'd been pulled into a crisis meeting after the envelope arrived. My ex, no longer just my wife, had locked herself in a restroom for 30 minutes. Then came out acting like nothing happened. But something had. Behind her eyes, people saw it. That panic. The realization she wasn't the one deciding anymore. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just let the quiet wrap around me. Each day, I woke up to frost on the windows and silence in the room. No notifications. No demands. No pretending to be interesting for someone who had already stopped seeing me. At night, I wrote. Not letters. Not rants. Plans. I mapped out what life would look like post her. Which cities I'd go to. What skills I'd update. The hobbies I'd buried just to fit into her world. I made a list of names, people I'd lost touch with. Friends who drifted because she didn't like too many old connections. They'd hear from me soon. But not yet. Because I wasn't done being invisible. Not to the world. Just to her. I wanted her to feel the echo. Not from a slam. But from the absence of return. I didn't leave the door open. I removed the entire hallway. I never planned to go after him. The guy she replaced me with, Travis, was forgettable. A gym body, startup smile kind of man. The type that brags about IPOs that never happen and talks fast to avoid saying anything real. But then something landed in my inbox. A mistake. An old shared account, the one we'd used for booking vacations, was still connected to her travel confirmations. His name was on a ticket. Same last name as the company she was pitching to next quarter. A conflict of interest. One that could kill her deal. So I dug. Not because I was jealous. Because I was awake now. His LinkedIn page was inflated. Half of what he claimed couldn't be verified. The other half was linked to shell companies, 2 of which had lawsuits pending for insider trading. None of this was hard to find. He wasn't hiding. Because people like him never expect consequences. I gathered every document. Cross-referenced names, dates, contracts. Then I created a digital package, neatly organized, anonymous, with no trace back to me. I sent it to 3 inboxes. The firm her company was negotiating with, the PR lead running her upcoming campaign, and the compliance officer at her board. No comments. No threats. No narrative. Just information. A spark with no visible match. 2 days later, headlines surfaced in financial feeds. Potential fraud flags in biotech deal. Her company's stock dipped. A press release followed. The deal was paused. Internal audit announced. I didn't smile. This wasn't revenge. It was removal. Travis vanished from her online presence. His name deleted from her comments. Photos quietly scrubbed. Rachel called again, this time with tension in her voice. Said, she's unraveling. You didn't even touch her, and she's falling apart. I didn't respond. Because Rachel was wrong. I had touched her. Not with words. Not with warnings. With distance. With truth. With a silence so dense it made her question her own image. The man she dismissed as irrelevant had become the ghost in her systems. And she couldn't block what she couldn't find. The thing about curated lives is, they rot from the inside first. But eventually, the outside cracks. Her Instagram stories got quieter. Brunch selfies vanished. The constant praise loop from her inner circle started thinning. At first, it was subtle. A few missed likes. Delayed replies. Silence where heart emojis used to be. Then came the dinner. It was a charity event. A Women in Tech fundraiser hosted by a high-profile VC. Her firm was a sponsor. Her name was on the banner. Rachel was there. She called me after. She smiled too wide, she said. Like she was trying to convince herself it was all still fine. But people weren't buying it. Because Travis didn't show. Because her speech was shorter than expected. Because someone, a former colleague, whispered just loud enough for others to hear. She really thought no one would notice, huh? The comments circled like smoke. No one said more, but it hung in the air, heavy with implication. That night, a board member pulled out of her mentorship program. A popular blog that once praised her for visionary leadership quietly deleted its feature. No scandals. No headlines. Just disassociation. Not out of anger. Out of caution. People don't cling to damaged reputations. They move to safer ground. And she could feel it. Her face and photos tightened. Her captions grew defensive. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is keep going, she posted. But the likes didn't return. Because perception had shifted. Not from an accusation, but from absence of defense. No one had to prove she'd lied. They just had to notice she stopped looking unbreakable. Meanwhile, I remained quiet. Not in hiding, just in silence. I watched from a distance as her world rewrote itself. Friends repositioning, alliances evaporating, opportunities closing. She had built an empire of image. But without trust, image folds fast. People had seen something. Or rather, they'd seen nothing, and that was worse. A vacuum where certainty used to be. And in that silence, doubt bloomed louder than truth ever could. Isolation doesn't happen all at once. It drips in. First, people stop reaching out. Then, they stop responding. Eventually, they forget how often they used to mention your name. That's where she landed. Alone, but not because someone slammed a door. Alone because no one held it open. I heard she tried to rebuild fast. Booked new panels. Released a podcast. Started reconnecting with her roots, as one blog spun it. But momentum's a funny thing. Once it turns against you, trying to force it back feels desperate. Her voice in interviews sounded thinner. Forced. Like she was trying to pitch stability while standing in emotional quicksand. Rachel texted me again. Said, she's not sleeping. Keeps checking who unfollowed her. Showed up at the office looking like she hadn't eaten in 2 days. I didn't reply, because she wasn't my concern anymore. But I still watched. Not out of malice. Out of clarity. She'd taken up so much of my bandwidth for so long that silence now felt like a clean operating system. I started going back to places I used to love. The record shop down on 7th. The gym I quit when she said it smelled like adolescence. Even met up with a friend I hadn't seen in 5 years. He didn't ask about her. He just looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." And I was. Because I wasn't explaining anymore. Wasn't adjusting. Wasn't orbiting around someone who treated my presence like a placeholder. Meanwhile, she was dialing numbers no longer saved in phones. Emails bouncing. Group chats muting her out. It wasn't that people hated her. They just sensed the shift. The loss of that edge she used to hold over everyone. The illusion of control, of knowing more, of always being the smartest one in the room. Now, the room was quiet. And even when she was in it, she didn't dominate anymore. Because when influence dries up, charisma becomes noise. And when attention fades, even the loudest ones sound like whispers. It was a Tuesday when she finally showed up. No warning. No text. Just the sound of knuckles on my door like nothing had ever broken. She looked different. Not worse. Just reduced. Hair tied back. No makeup. A sweater too big for her frame. The kind of outfit you wear when you're trying to look casual, but can't stop trembling under the fabric. I opened the door. Said nothing. She stepped inside like she still had permission. Like the air between us hadn't been scraped clean. She talked fast, about misunderstandings, about pressure, about how things got complicated. Said she missed the way I used to look at her. The way I used to make her feel seen. I didn't answer, because none of that mattered anymore. She paused, waited for a reaction. Didn't get one. Then she tried again, this time more direct. Said she wanted to understand what had happened. Why I left. Why I didn't fight for us. I just stared at her. Because that question wasn't for me. It was for her. She wasn't asking for truth. She was asking for narrative. A script to justify the collapse. A way to place herself as victim to something bigger than her own choices. But I wasn't giving her that. I'd already said everything I needed to say. With silence. With distance. With action. She walked to the kitchen like muscle memory, reached for the coffee mug I always used. It wasn't there. She looked at the empty hook, realized it had been removed, and something in her shoulders dropped. Not from sadness. From clarity. She understood then. This wasn't a pause. It was an ending she never got to write. She tried one more sentence, voice quiet, cracking. Is there anything left to save? Still, I said nothing. Because the answer was obvious. And answers don't need volume. They need finality. She left the apartment slower than she entered. Didn't slam the door. Didn't cry. But when the door clicked shut, it echoed. Not through the hallway. Through her. Because silence can be louder than any goodbye. Collapse isn't always explosive. Sometimes, it's a quiet unraveling. Threads slipping one by one until nothing holds. After that day, she tried to regain footing. Reached out to old friends, posted curated photos, dropped hints of exciting projects. But it landed flat. The energy wasn't there. The algorithm wasn't kind. People scrolled past. Because something was off. That effortless control she used to wield, gone. Her voice, once sharp and certain, now cracked at the edges. At events, she smiled too wide. Laughed a second too long. You could see it in the eyes of those around her. They no longer envied her. They pitied her. Then came the panel. The one she used to dominate every year. Only this time, she wasn't asked to speak, just attend. As a guest, she went anyway. Walked in like she still owned the room. But the nods were softer. The greetings polite, not warm. One of the assistants didn't even recognize her. Later, I saw a clip someone posted. She was standing near the back, arms crossed, eyes darting, as if she was searching for some familiar anchor in a sea of strangers who once adored her. There was no anchor, because the current had shifted. Behind the scenes, I heard she lost 2 brand deals. One quietly pulled out. Another simply stopped replying. Her name no longer sparked excitement, just discomfort. And all I did was nothing. No posts. No public words. No revenge. Just silence. I was out hiking when a friend told me she'd gone off social media entirely. Deleted her account. No explanation. Just disappeared. Some thought she was rebranding. Others said burnout. But I knew better. It wasn't a pivot. It was a collapse. And in the middle of that fall, I wasn't there. Because I was already gone. Not physically. Emotionally. Mentally. Entirely. I'd started new routines. Built new boundaries. Rediscovered the version of me that didn't explain or justify, only moved. People around me saw it too. Whatever you're doing, someone told me at the gym, keep doing it. You're locked in. And I was. Not because of spite, but because clarity becomes armor when worn long enough. She lost her stage. And I found my peace. I saw her one last time. Not by design. It was a bookstore downtown, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and forgotten stories. I hadn't been there in years. She was standing by the philosophy section, flipping through a paperback, lost in thought. She didn't notice me at first, and I almost left without saying anything. But something in the stillness pulled me closer. Not for closure. Not for drama. Just to see. She looked up, and I saw it. The flicker of something behind her eyes. Recognition. Regret. Maybe both. She said my name like it didn't belong to me anymore. I nodded. Said nothing. There was no warmth between us. Just the faint echo of what used to be. She asked how I'd been. I said, better. It wasn't spiteful. It wasn't performative. It was just true. She nodded, eyes dropping to the floor. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Was any of it real? That's the thing about silence. It can feel like punishment when someone's not ready to accept responsibility. I looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, I saw not the woman who betrayed me, but the one who thought I'd never leave. The one who confused access with permanence. Who believed loyalty was something to test, not cherish. But I was no longer the man she remembered. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilt. Stronger. Quieter. Sharper. So I gave her the answer she wasn't ready for. I said, I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Then I turned and walked away. No hug. No second glance. No lingering. Because the story was over. Not with a bang. With a choice. Mine. And while she stood frozen in that quiet aisle, surrounded by books full of other people's endings, I walked into mine. One that didn't need her name in the footnotes. One that began exactly where hers stopped echoing. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.